romance readers. I am Liz Donatelli. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, the #1 romance novel talk show on YouTube. I welcomed back Victorian historical romance author Elizabeth Everett to discuss A Perfect Equation, Book 2 in her Secret Scientists of London series. Elizabeth also talked about the real-life mathematician that inspired her main character. She answered the question,
Is love a science?
And Elizabeth played Victorian Courtship Trivia. Enjoy, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome back to Reader Seeks Romance.
Thank you so much for having me back, Liz.
It is a pleasure. Congratulations on the release of your Victorian historical romance, A Perfect Equation, Book 2 in the Secret Scientists of London series.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited.
I am a fan of your series. I am not a fan of mathematical computations and theories. The women in your novels are. What do you say to mathophobic readers who might be hesitant to read A Perfect Equation?
So, I am terrible at math. Math gives me a headache. I'm not going to make you do any actual equations, although there are two equations in the book that kind of define like what she does. There's math, and then there's the kind of math that Letty Fenley, who's the main character in A Perfect Equation, does. And that math, even though it takes me a very long time to understand, is actually quite beautiful. So I think a lot of times when we think of math, we think of algebra, or we think of calculus, or we think of kind of practical math, which really can be frustrating, especially as women. Studies show that girls lose interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math in their early adolescence. And a lot of them never recover that interest. And part of it is because of the way that society, our culture, treats women who are smart or intellectual. You know, you can either be smart or you can be pretty, but you can't be both. Most people who consider themselves math phobic, probably if they weren't being educated, I think in the way that most people are educated in public schools, and I think if we hadn't culturally done this for ourselves, I think it would be a different story. So A Perfect Equation is enemies to lovers, although I would say more, they're not necessarily enemies so much as they once thought highly of each other, and then something happened and they're quite disappointed in each other. So disappointed people to lovers. The love story is really about second chances, but not with each other, more with themselves. This book is also set in Athena's retreat, which is a secret haven for women scientists, and they're forced to work together to save it. They recognize why the other person is so guarded and is so hurt. And once they have that mutual recognition, those walls come right down, because there's always been the sense between the two of them that if they could just figure out the key to the other person, you know, they would be a match. I modeled her on an actual historical figure, Sophie Germain. She was somewhat more free than we are, because even though there was still prejudice against intelligent women, it wasn't in the same way. You either had to be smart or you had to be pretty. Like culturally, that didn't exist in the 1700s. So when she found an interest, there was no one telling her, you can't do that or you're not going to get a husband, or you can't do that or you're not going to be popular. They just said, really? That's not something that women of your station do. But she persevered.
Gray and Letty are both deeply sympathetic characters who both know what it feels like to be outsiders, to be different, and I won't give any spoilers away. Gray's answer to that is to learn to fit in and to belong and not make any waves. And Letty gladly makes waves when she feels the need and strives to carve out her own niche in the world. Which part of Gray's and Letty's individual journeys to loving each other was most gratifying for you to write?
I think for Gray, it was a little hard because I wanted to make sure the timing was right? Because he can't melt, too fast and he probably never will 100%. Books continue even after you shut the last page, for me at least. So you want to make sure that you let the readers know that this is a whole person and it's going to take them a while to keep moving forward. It was satisfying, but it was also difficult. I was also constantly thinking about the timing and the pacing of him because I didn't want it to happen too fast or too slow. But the thing about Letty is A Perfect Equation I wrote in the beginning of the pandemic, and I was angry and frustrated and at a loss and vulnerable and all of these kind of difficult things. And Letty was a real channel for me for some of that frustration and anger. And actually, that when I first sent the first draft of it to my editor, she was like, it's a little dark. We're gonna have to tone this a little down. She was really angry. So the nice part for me, especially when I revised the book and was writing Letty, is that some of her sharp edges were softened by Gray. She never envisioned that she was going to have a relationship with someone. And the rest of her edges are softened by these female friendships that she makes. She has been holding herself back from real friendships, but she gives into it and she lets herself be friends with these women. And that's where the rest of her walls start to come down. So she can't fall in love with Gray without having had that experience with these women. Letty's arc is not just because of her relationship with Gray, it's also because of her relationship with these women who become her friends.
There are parallels drawn between love and science in your work. Is love a science?
I actually had a whole discussion about that in book 3, and then I cut it because it was like too wordy. One of the women scientists who's a biologist was like, well, it's just all it is a series of reactions that we've named something pretty so that we can justify them. The men that she's speaking to get very upset and they're like, what are you talking about? Love is kismet. It's mystical. It's emotional. It's from the heart. It's inexplicable. And she was like, no, it's not. It's completely explicable. It is about science. It's about our, sex is existential, right? It's about the continuation of the species. So we do certain things to each other to attract the other person. In this day and age, sex is not existential. So yes, if you're speaking to someone who has a very literal mindset, then yes, there's a scientific basis for it. And everything that we feel, the dopamine, the adrenaline, all of this chemical process that you call falling in love can actually be broken down, and you can see on the micro level exactly why your body chemistry is doing what it does. There's also something, kind of lovely and intangible and poetic and beautiful about it. And that's not scientific. That's just comes from who we are as evolved humans and what we've created out of it.
A Perfect Equation does not include a character named Liz Donatelli. Was that an oversight?
It was. So listen, in my defense though, Liz, A Lady's Formula for Love came out. I had already finished my revisions for Perfect Equation.
It's okay. It's all right,
So
all right.
We have to wait for your time to shine, my friend.
Lab experiments frequently explode in The Secret Scientists of London. I envision you writing those scenes while wearing a devilish smile. True or false?
True. Yeah, I just play it for laughs. I'm not all serious all the time in this book. Like, it is a rom-com. I do like slapstick comedy. I do like kind of like low-hanging fruit and explosions. Come on, they're funny.
Every bit of comedy that you include, it's often physical. And you write it so well that I completely can see it. And I'm like, wow, this would be a good BBC series. The Perils of Miss Cordelia, Braveheart, and the Castle of Doom is a romance that is passed around at some point between characters in the novel. And it opened the door for some pro-romance reading discussions and dialogue. And I was wondering, did you include that to answer any particular critics of yours or critics in general, or what inspired the inclusion of that in A Perfect Equation?
I wrote about a romance novel in the romance novel, very meta, because Letty, the main character, was so guarded and so prickly and so hurt, and she was so defensive that I needed a way to show readers how kind of vulnerable she was and how she really was. Oh, she really did have a sense of romance about her. And because if you didn't have that to show that she is vulnerable and soft inside, she might not be as likable as a character because she's pretty prickly in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But when the world is too much for her to handle, when she becomes overwhelmed and she's just really angry and really hurt, she wraps herself up in a blanket and she reads her romance novels. And it's a safe place for her to be, because even if she can't have that in her own life, she feels better knowing that those stories exist.
Which is not a title of a Victorian self-help book for unmarried women. Maiden, Prepare to Become a Happy Wife and Mother, published 1868 by Henry Butler. Avoiding Spinsterhood, published 1883 by Reverend Oliver Simpson. Advice to Single Women, published 1899 by Hayden Brown, which is not an actual self-help book title.
Is this a trick question? Because they all sound exactly like the kind of books that were marketed to women in the late 1800s. They really do.
Well, thank you for that compliment, because one of them I did come up with.
You came up with the first one, right? Because it's perfect. It's pitch perfect.
Maiden, Prepare to Become a Happy Wife and Mother?
Yeah.
Is that your answer?
Yeah.
The answer is Avoiding Spinsterhood. Which of the following is a Victorian term of endearment for a fiancé? Boop, birdie, bunty.
Birdie?
So you're saying birdie is a Victorian term of endearment? No, the answer is boop.
Boop. Because sure, who wouldn't want to be called boop?
Dining table signaling was a way for single young Victorians to discreetly communicate in public. What did it mean when a person held up a knife and a fork in each hand? Knife and a fork in each hand. Was the person asking, would you like to dance tonight? Do you fancy me? When can I see you?
How about would you like to dance? No.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
It is wrong. When can I see you? And they actually had answers. Then there's other ways to answer yes, no. I wasn't going to go into all that, but there's all these different, you put your napkin, you do this, you do that. So
parties, everybody's just.
Now that would be a scene for a Victorian rom-com.
That would be excellent. Oh my goodness. And they're misinterpreting, like you think you're looking at the wrong person at the wrong time. And they're taking their fork and going like this.
The central function of the social season was its role in marriage making. The season began in April and ended each year on August 12th because August 12th is the feast of St. Ambrose. August 12th is the beginning of the shooting season for grouse. August 12th is the end of the Anglican Church's fiscal year.
I think it's B. I think it's the beginning of shooting season.
You are correct. August 12th, known as Glorious 12th, is the beginning of the shooting season for grouse. And a grouse is a bird. Elaborate lace-trimmed Valentine's Day cards were exchanged between lovers in the Victorian era. However, those who wanted to fend off an unwanted suitor would send a commercially bought postcard that contained an insulting poem and illustration. They were sent anonymously, so the receiver had to guess who hated him or her.
It's so mean.
What were these cruel cards called? Flapdoodles, Vinegar Valentine, Catty Cupids.
Okay, so I've also figured out why I don't do on these tests. These are all late Victorian courting rituals.
But who knows for sure?
Okay, I think they were probably I like how you're I think they were Vinegar Valentines.
You are correct. You ended strong.
I did.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you again for joining me here on Reader Seeks Romance. It is always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time.